time after the program, I would show you my rain barrel irrigation system, and if you're not interested in rain barrels, well, you don't have to take your time out for that. And I'm doing the program, actually, it's about World War II and World War II veterans' experiences, but also I'm bringing my Air Force time into that because the Korean War started 4 years after World War II vets came home. And a large part of our experienced military in that Korean War were reservists who would pull right back into the military. And I know because I worked in wing headquarters where we dealt with that problem. But just before we get started seriously, Lori is my partner on all this. And Lori, by the way, Lori really knows her dad because we were out at the park a few days ago, and it was getting dark. Lori and I were taking a walk, and I was trying to see how to cut a hook off of a fishing line, and I can't see unless I lay my glasses down. I did. And Hunter and I were together at the campfire, and I got up and stepped on the glasses and just crushed them. Well, when Lori and Nina came back, Lori says, if you know I remember this, Lori says, Hunter, did he cuss? And Hunter says, no. Lori looked at me and says, Dad, what's wrong? What's wrong, Dad? You're not feeling well.
Sorry.
Anyway, when there's a file on down at the public library of all of the veterans interviews that were done a few years back, and I have actually watched all of those interviews of the people I know. This is only a listing of the people who are Kiwanians or past Kiwanians, and when you look at that list of down at the lower part of that, those are those World War II veterans who were interviewed a few years back. They're all deceased now, and so I think it would be. I want to encourage people to actually, if they want to know more about these people they've known, especially Kiwanians, to go check some of that out. Now, also, Lori, could you play Wilton? I think all you got to do on that one song is play it. I think that's what I think it's up.
Okay.
Wilton should be on there. Okay, now turn the volume up.
Oh, yeah. That's well.
Yes. Now, listen to.
We were on the Del Monte pineapple plantation on the northwest part of Mindanao. And we'd been pulled out of combat, and we were in combined training, tank, infantry, artillery training with flamethrowers, ready for the landing on the big southern island of Japan. And we found out later we would have landed in support of the 1st Cavalry Division. And so I lived on wartime again because we wouldn't survive that fight.
Okay. I just wanted to show you, that's just a small clipping of the way they did those interviews. And Wilton had just finished talking about he had acted as a defense attorney for one of his sergeants who had actually accidentally shot another soldier accidentally. And the soldier lost his leg. And Wilton was his defense attorney. And he died. Actually, the sergeant was he had to forfeit part of his pay for a few months, but it wasn't much. But they were all going through so much together. And but anyway, then he moved on to this, and what hit me with this was that of all of those tapes of those veterans that I listened to who were in combat in Europe or in the Pacific, they all were lined up for Japan. Even Bill Phillips, he had already been over in Italy. He was on his way. He was on his way to Japan. and almost all of them who were actually, before the bomb was dropped, before that atomic bomb was dropped, you had soldiers moving towards Japan. Okay. All right, yeah, moving on up. In my own experience, I had, I'm starting with Air Force time first. And I was from July 11th, 1950, just a few days after the Korean War started, until July 10th of 54. The first 2 years I was with the 93rd Bomb Wing in California in Strategic Air Command. And then the next 2 years I was at headquarters SAC in Omaha. And I've got a here. I've got a letter here, and I'm not going to read this letter to you, but this letter was typed out on an old manual typewriter. It's dated January 20th, 1952. And this letter is from a major who was in charge of personnel programming at SAC headquarters. I'd worked for him for 2 years in California, and then he was moved up to SAC headquarters in Omaha. And he wrote me and asked me would I like to work in his shop. And I wrote him back and said I would. 2 weeks later, I was in Omaha. In the 93rd Bomb Wing, I think I've got some points down here. Move on down a little bit. My experience with the 93rd Bomb Wing, I first started out as a steno, or a stenographer in wing headquarters. And that got me into, as I said, the Korean War had just started. We were pulling in reservists who had been combat veterans of World War II. And these were people who had already started families. They had wives and children. And there were a lot of them were pleading hardship. They wanted, hardship discharges. And one of the people I had to deal with was this Joe McCarthy. Senator McCarthy at that time was, he was finding a communist behind every bush, and everybody was scared to death of it. And we were instructed that if we got a request from McCarthy's office to try to get a hardship discharge from anybody from Wisconsin, to act on it within 24 hours. Nobody else, everybody else's complaints or requests could sit in the basket for a week or two. But McCarthy had to be answered quick. Then I went to career guidance school in Denver, and to be certified as a career guidance specialist. And in that job, I would interview and test and assign enlisted personnel to the different jobs at the 93rd Bomb Wing. And then before I left there, I was running the tech school section for the 93rd Bomb Wing, and that I would call in these enlisted personnel. It could be private to master sergeant, because we were doing a lot of retraining and constantly, mechanics especially, aircraft mechanics, radar, electronics. They're in school half their life, or more. So we're getting those people off to school, getting them back, getting them into the right jobs. Okay, then in the, down here, the next part of my work was, go back that a little bit. But, okay, the next part of my work was in the, manning the SAC units for, actually we had the 2nd, 8th, and 15th Air Forces. 2nd on the East Coast, 8th Air Force covered Central Mountain area, 15th covered the West Coast. And we were forming all kinds of bases at that time. They're bringing on the B-47 bomber, and we were forming new wings, and our job was to program all the personnel into those new wings that were being formed. And one of the jobs that I had when I was doing that, we had what they call aviation field depot squadrons. And hi, you guys, can we find you a seat?
I'm fine, Stan. I've been sitting all day.
No, you have my seat.
Oh, no, I'm perfectly
Okay.
fine.
Well, we had these units called aviation field depot squadrons. These squadrons were the places where they assembled the atomic bomb. They were the assembly units. And we had assembly units in Greenland and Labrador. And there had been, it was so new, there was no personnel regulations in a standard regulation form. The personnel communication was in the file cabinets, just back and forth between the wings. And actually, when I first went to SAC, they gave me about 2 months to just go through the files and get all that stuff dug out, put it together, and try to put it into regulation form. And that was one of my jobs. Another thing that SAC had was the radar bomb scoring units. I don't know if you've heard of this, but every major city in the United States would have a radar bomb scoring unit, and they would bomb those cities with radar. And they even got to the point where they were running like a baseball tournament. You know, they were competing. You competed like select crew was the top crew, but if you could get in the top select ranks, your pay and rank automatically went up. As soon as your performance dropped, your pay went down. And that Curtis LeMay established that. I mean, you talk about a capitalist. He was doing it. All right, I'm going to move on up. I want to talk about in-flight refueling. When I went for the 93rd in 1950, we were just beginning in-flight refueling. And we were using the old prop-driven KC-97s to refuel our B-29s and B-50s. And one of my jobs was to everybody I interviewed is ask them if they had any experience in flying small aircraft. Because apparently, if you can fly a small airplane, you're better equipped to fly that boom they have the boom operator tail into the tanker, and you fly that boom into the nozzle. And so that was one of the things to find out who had small airplane experience. Okay, you'll move on. While at SAC headquarters, some memorable things that Jimmy Stewart, when he was doing the movie Strategic Air Command, have you ever seen that? Okay. He walked through my office, past my office, he had his Brigadier General's uniform on. He actually was. He was a World War II pilot. And, so Curtis LeMay, I mean, he was a hard character. One night I had to do charge of quarters duty in LeMay's office. And one of my jobs that was when they had the old mechanical typewriters with the ribbons, you know. I had to go around and check all the typewriters to be sure they took the ribbons out and locked them up in a safe. Really? I mean, they had to take those ribbons out and lock them up in a safe before they left. Then when they were doing, you remember when they were doing the hydrogen bomb tests in the Pacific? I was at SAC then. I'd been, I think, around 53. And Dr. Teller, who was kind of the head developer of the hydrogen bomb, he was in it through my office constantly, going over to operations analysis. I had some guys in a carpool there in Omaha. I lived off base. It was my time to pick them up. I go by, nobody home. These guys, I learned later, they were going to those tests. And that was so hush-hush, they wouldn't even tell me about it. You know, they wouldn't even tell me they're leaving. Okay, no. Okay, now this is a picture. This is the only airplane that the Air Force had that could deliver the hydrogen bomb. And look at the size of that thing. This B-36, the people who flew this thing, they had a description of it that say they got 6 turning and 4 burning. They had 10 engines. And it had 6 pusher type engines, and it had 2 jets out on the wingtips. But this thing had, it could carry the Mark 17 hydrogen bomb, 25 feet long, 5 feet in diameter, weighed 42,000 pounds. And it's the heaviest and bulkiest nuclear bomber. It had a range of 9,300 miles, and it could fly above 50,000 feet. And this thing was so slow that if a fighter got onto this thing at a lower altitude, it may be just like shooting ducks in a barrel. But once they got up to that top altitude, the fighters at that time couldn't operate at that altitude. They couldn't, about flying, what would happen on that?
There's not enough density of the air to support lift.
Yeah. So until they developed missiles and they developed something capable of getting up there to this thing, it's okay. But now this airplane did not have a refueling capacity for other bombers. It did have. We saw a picture when it had a refueling boom coming down underneath it. It was refueling a small support airplane. But okay, you're gonna move on.
How many of those did we have? Yeah.
I don't know. I could go back and I probably could find that out, but I'm not sure how many we had. That was phased out to bring on the B-52. The B-52 can carry a nuclear hydrogen bomb, but in Vietnam the B-52 is carrying mostly fireworks, aren't they? To burn up the forest or whatever they did over there. In the Army, I'm going backwards here to the Army. I trained as a telephone lineman with the Field Artillery, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And Nicole, that was in the old days. We had one unit there, mule packers. They actually loaded packed artillery on mules, so they were for fighting mountain warfare. They also, as a telephone lineman, I would carry a switchboard on my back. You had the old crank, and Brittany, they tell me they still train in that now, Fort Sill.
We still have those.
Yeah. And and you'd string your line out. Mostly you just string your telephone lines right on the ground when you're moving. Then after that, I was assigned to the 4th Coast Artillery at Fort Amador, the Panama Canal Zone. And before we start talking about any of this, let's go to an overview map of the canal. Okay, I'm going to do this first. All right, let's actually look at this first. Okay, this is the Atlantic side, this is from the Caribbean, and down here is where I was. Okay, and before they dammed up the river there and formed Gatun and flooded all this area, you didn't have a lot of water there. And I guess this winter I read the personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. In 1852, the Army sent him with members of the 4th Infantry Division to Panama. They had to cross the isthmus on foot, and then they were catching a ship down here, and they were going to go up to San Francisco to protect the gold in the gold rush days coming in there. Well, anyway, Grant talks about some of the problems he had there, and I've got something here. Okay, this is just a line from Grant's memoirs. He says, about 1/7 of those who left New York Harbor with the 4th Infantry Division on the 5th of July now lie buried on the Isthmus of Panama or on Flamingo Island in the Panama Bay. And we can look now, or you turn the other big map that shows the bay. Okay. This is the main traffic coming out of the canal. Okay. And this is the island of Nails. That's where I worked some training, an underground control station called a case point. We control the minefield from here. They also had a, let's see, this would be Flamingo Island. They also had a control station on Flamingo Island nearby. Paraco is off the left. At that time we didn't have anything over there. we had the mainland was connected to Nails by a causeway. That causeway was built up of the granite that came out of the Weaver Cut. And the causeway had from Fort Amador going down to Nails, you had a narrow gauge railroad, and you also had a road that you could drive down there. Now, and something interesting about this, Nails, by the way, you know, when we turned over the canal, Panama, Norienko had his office called on Nails. Yeah, and now this whole thing in here, Fort Amador, all of this is high-rise luxury hotels. So if you've been to it now recently, if you go over there, this is all luxury stuff. That all that old military stuff is coming out of there. Now, let's see. Go back up there, Billy. Back it up some. Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, that's what I'm looking. All right, here's an aerial photo. This, in the background here, either the second or the third barracks was where I was housed at Fort Amador. And over here, the main traffic canal went right by my barracks. And you could see the boats and traffic coming right by there. This is that causeway I'm talking about. This is Naos Island for working the underground control station. And this would be Flamingo. This is the island where Grant talked about. He set up hospital tents on Flamingo Island for this cholera epidemic. That's what it was. And a lot of troops died there. Now let's go on down to look at the map that shows those. Well, let's go on to the mine planning board. Is that all right? Maybe it comes. Okay. These, you know, typically you think of a mine, a water mine, as being a big round ball that a ship runs into and explodes it. These mines were more like, you know, like a farmer's old creamery can. It's more, I mean, it's more like that shape than what I've got here. It's almost like farmer's round creamery in the old-fashioned cans. Anyway, these are steel. By the way, these mines, you didn't write them to do anything, to cause them to alert or anything. These mines had a steel case. I worked for a while shoveling, these things hold 2,000 pounds of TNT. I worked for a while in a pit where they would drop, with a crane, they drop these mines down to the floor of the pit. And you use a wood or a brass shovel, and you fill this thing with TNT. And we would have to, once a week, we'd have to go to the hospital and do a blood test to see what the blood is. We didn't have any face masks, no safety gear. But this mine, it had a firing device, it had underground water cable, and it had a coil rod, a magnetic coil rod up the center. This thing, when any ship came over this, it would set up a signal, which would come back to your casement and let you know that the ship was coming over your mine. And we had so much traffic coming out of that canal that you had to have total control. And the panel would light up, you could follow the ship right over the mine field. The literature that I read, these mines, they had these mines in Panama and other places in the harbors. One mine was never fired against the independent vessel. Not long, during the entire time they were there. And now, the mine, I looked this up in files. I find that, now here's kind of a lineup. Yeah, I had this sort of lineup. I didn't need that quite for it. Okay, out ahead of the minefield, you have hydrophones. These hydrophones are dropped in the water. Anything coming through the mine, the propeller, you pick up the propeller beat. It goes back to the underground control station, and you had a graph machine like a doctor's cardiogram machine. And the people that read those things could tell you basically what's going through there, what's coming in over these hydrophones. Then as we come in, we had this out here because we also had artillery pieces set up on those islands on an island, Tababuia, I think on the Boga, and I know they had on some of the other small islands, they had artillery pieces that could go in too. And then you have the minefields. There were 13 mines in a group, and I guess maybe I don't show that too well. You have 13 mines in a group. These mines would be 100 feet apart, and those mines would be wired into a distribution box, which is about that way around. That box would be controlling 13 mines. Then you'd have the cable off of that box going back to the control station. Those would be wired. Yeah.
You drew the picture, so
Yeah.
you might as well see it.
I would change that. I am so crude, I don't really have any talent for art. And, but they, in the Panama minefield, they had, a total of 338 mines. That's what they had. At the 1946, during that year, we pulled up all the mines that have been there, probably I don't know how long they've been down the bottom. But we pulled them up, brought them in, dumped the TNT out of them, sprayed them, and I did a lot of that spray. In fact, I got KP duty for a week for one of my stunts. But we're supposed to, they had a sandblasting machine sitting in the corner. And they had us with a hammer chisel pounding the barnacle and rust off these mines. And I thought, man, that was nuts. And so I sneaked off in the jungle and take a nap. And then I went to sleep, and then from the little train came down to pick us up, take us back to the base. It woke me up, but I was, I had to run to catch the train, and of course, the sergeant, he knew what was going on, Well, the next day, the first sergeant called me in and told me how I was letting the rest of the soldiers down, but I told 18-year-old kid, I told him, look, you've got sandblasting. Come over here in the corner. Whatever I need to do that with a hammer and chisel. Well, I found out he gave me about a week. But anyway,
So can I ask a question before you go on? So even though you never set these mines off, if you had to, you're always going by the audible signal that somebody's getting up the hydrophone. You never set eyes on the boats?
yeah, you had observation stations observing what's going on too. And then no doubt you'd be trying to make radio contact with whoever it was and finding out, what. But yeah, you had these mines, they could be set on automatic fire. They could be set. I mean, you could set them so that anything going over a mine would blow. But we would have always on control. And by the way, we did have in each of those mines, you have to go back to take a look at that one mine there. Down here, these lead weights would hold this thing down so it was set right on the channel there. And you also had a buoy. You had a firing device down here, and you had a buoy attached to this mine, and it was sunk with the mine. And when you wanted to pull the mine up to service it from the control panel on casely, you could fire that trigger, and the buoy pops up. In fact, with the popping one, I was out there one time, and there was a fishing boat with Panamanian natives in it, and we popped the buoy and it popped up on the water right behind their boat. They just about left the boat. I mean, it went straight up. And another time, we had a barge that sunk in the channel and was walking the channel, and we had a diver go down and help guide one of these mines in around the barge, and they blew the barge apart. And if anybody ever wanted fresh fish, they loved them. That's it. Okay. All right. Wait a minute. Let's go back to that.
Could you show us where those mines were located on that?
Yes. Okay. That's good. Oh, all right. That is good. As I've said, you've got the causeway here that's made out of granite, and here's Nails Island. And all you have to do to block anything from getting into that canal, run your minefield and a fan from Nails Island around the land. That's all it takes. That's all it takes, and you can't get a ship in if you do that.
So had those been deployed at the start of World War II?
This kind of a mine was in use going back even before World War II. But yeah, these mines go back a long way, and until it was after 1946, they were controlled by the Army, Coast Guard, and then later, I believe in the 1950s, they went under control of the Navy. And by the way, Boston Harbor, I had a graphic of Boston Harbor and all the mines protecting Boston Harbor, and they didn't destroy their casemate until 1996. It wasn't operational, but they destroyed their casemate, that's, control section on land, and built a city